You don't forget the sound of someone screeching like a kettle about to blow, especially not when it's coming from a bleach-blonde HOA board member in a leopard print visor. It was Saturday morning, and I was halfway through pressure washing my driveway when I heard the unmistakable roar of a golf cart engine, followed by a sharp voice yelling, "Excuse me." "Excuse me." I turned, hose in hand, to see Karrenna, our HOA vice president, self-appointed enforcer of all lawn heights and mailbox paint shades, barreling down the common sidewalk in her tricked-out golf cart. She slammed the brakes right at the edge of my driveway, a trail of dust swirling behind her. "Patrick Zeller," she barked, like a drill sergeant who just caught someone skipping inspection. "I need access through your driveway." I blinked. "For what?" "I'm late for the HOA budget meeting." "You've blocked the shortcut again." She pointed past me, toward the thin strip of asphalt that ran along the back of my property, a dead-end maintenance road that led to nowhere and was technically part of my deeded land. Years ago, before I bought the place, people would cut through it with carts, bikes, or whatever else, treating it like a shortcut to the country club. Not anymore, I crossed my arms. "It's not a shortcut, it's my private access road. It's for community use," she snapped. "You can't just gate off something we've used for years." "You mean trespass on for years?" I tilted my head. "I filed a notice with the county, it's mine, and I'm installing the gate next week." Karrenna's face turned the color of boiled lobster. "You'll be hearing from the HOA attorney?" "Great," I said, turning the hose back on. "Tell him to bring snacks." She actually screamed and peeled off, nearly clipping my mailbox as she flew down the sidewalk. 2 houses down, she stopped to talk to someone, pointed at me. Probably telling them I was a danger to the community. By Monday, I had 3 violation notices taped to my front door. One said I had created a hostile environment. Another claimed my garbage bin was visible for more than 20 minutes post-collection. The third accused me of unauthorized landscaping because I'd trimmed the hedges. I knew exactly what this was. Retaliation. Karrenna was using her HOA power to intimidate me into reopening that shortcut. But what she didn't know was that I'd been documenting every interaction, every bogus fine, every whispered threat with a camera mounted in my window, and I wasn't going to play nice. Not anymore. By Thursday morning, the gate installers arrived just after sunrise. 2 trucks, a trailer, and a team of 3 guys in steel toed boots began unloading posts and panels. I greeted them with coffee and a copy of the plat map highlighted and notarized to make sure they knew exactly where the property boundaries were. By 9, the posts were in. By noon, the keypad box was mounted. And by 3, the gate stood tall black iron, motorized, and impossible to miss. It extended across the width of my private access road like a final period on the sentence I'd been writing for weeks. The installers packed up, left me the manual, and handed over the remote with a chuckle. "You're about to make someone real mad." I didn't have to wait long. At 5 sharp, just as the sun dipped low enough to cast long shadows across the cul-de-sac, a familiar engine growled down the street. Karrenna's golf cart came into view, this time with a passenger, a man in a navy blazer and khakis holding a clipboard. They pulled up to the gate, and while the man squinted at the keypad, Karrenna stepped out and marched toward me like a wind-up toy running out of patience. "You've made a huge mistake," she said, voice low and tight. "That's funny," I replied. "I was just thinking how peaceful it's been without uninvited carts buzzing past my garage." "This is Chadwick," she said, gesturing toward the man. "He's a certified easement assessor. We're here to inspect the obstruction." Chadwick didn't look thrilled to be there. "Can I see the property documents, please?" I handed him the folder I'd already prepared. He flipped through the surveyor's report, the parcel map, and the easement release signed by the previous owner. His eyebrows slowly climbed as he read. "This isn't common ground," he finally said. "It's privately owned, and the easement was dissolved 2 years ago." Karrenna's jaw clenched. "There was an understanding." "Understandings don't override legal filings," Chadwick replied, glancing at the gate. You can't enforce access here, not unless the HOA has a recorded easement. Do you have one? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned on her heel and stormed off, muttering something about escalation and non-compliance. Chadwick gave me an apologetic nod before jogging to catch up with her. That night, someone threw raw eggs at the gate. I found the mess in the morning, yolks streaked across the iron bars, shells in the gravel. I checked the security footage and sure enough, it was a teenager I recognized, son of one of the board members. I didn't say anything right away. I just saved the footage and added it to the growing folder labeled HOA harassment. By the end of the week, the harassment escalated. I woke up to find my mailbox bent backward like someone had kicked it. My trash can was tipped over in the street, contents scattered. And on Saturday morning, a sheet of paper was taped to my front door. A demand to appear at an emergency compliance hearing held in the HOA clubhouse. The notice wasn't signed. I still went. The clubhouse smelled like lemon-scented disinfectant and entitlement. Inside, the hearing was just the usual suspects. Karrenna, 2 other board members I barely knew, and an empty folding chair waiting for me. I sat down and folded my arms. This meeting, Karrenna began, is to address ongoing disruptions caused by your obstruction of communal traffic flow. You mean my gate, I said. On my land, she ignored me. We've received complaints from multiple residents about your refusal to cooperate with neighborhood standards. I kept my tone even. Which standards are those? Because I reviewed the HOA charter. There's nothing in there about required access for golf carts or a clause that says I have to let people trespass. One of the board members, a guy named Louis with a comb-over and a nervous tick, piped up. It's more about the spirit of the community, Mr. Zeller. We want to promote unity. Unity, I repeated. By vandalizing my property and filing fake violations, real neighborly, Karrenna's eyes narrowed. Your attitude is the issue here. I leaned forward. You want to talk attitude? I've got footage of your son egging my gate. I've got timestamps on every fabricated violation notice, and now you're trying to hold an unsanctioned hearing with no legal counsel present? You're digging a hole. Silence. Even Louis stopped fidgeting. I stood up. This isn't a hearing, it's a tantrum. And I'm done playing along. I walked out without waiting for a response. The next day, I filed a formal complaint with the county ombudsman. I attached documents, footage, and a timeline of incidents. I also contacted a land use attorney, who confirmed that the HOA had zero legal standing to demand access through my property. In fact, their retaliation bordered on organized harassment. 3 days later, a brown sedan with county plates rolled into the neighborhood. I watched from my porch as a compliance officer walked straight into the HOA office and closed the door behind him. He stayed there for over an hour. That evening, Karrenna showed up again. No golf cart this time, just her, walking stiffly up my driveway in wedge heels, holding an envelope. She didn't knock, just dropped the envelope in my mailbox and walked away. Inside was a letter, typed and signed, stating that all previous violations had been rescinded due to clerical error. It also informed me that the HOA would cease any further action regarding the access road until further legal clarification. I laughed out loud, but it wasn't over. Not even close, because 2 days later I got a call from the land use attorney. Patrick, he said, voice tense. You're not going to believe what they tried to file with the zoning board. I braced myself. They're claiming the road is part of a proposed green corridor extension for community recreation. They submitted a request to rezone your strip of land as common use. I sat down hard on the kitchen stool. They're trying to take it through zoning. They're calling it a recreational path with historic utility, which is nonsense, but if they get traction, it opens the door to a forced easement. I didn't need more explanation. This wasn't just petty power games anymore. This was a coordinated attempt to seize part of my property under a fake community initiative, and if I didn't stop it, They might just get away with it. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to burn their little scheme to the ground legally. I met with my attorney the next morning in his cramped office above a vape store downtown. He was a quiet man named Ray, who looked more like a librarian than a land use specialist, but he'd worked 2 decades in municipal zoning and knew the codes as intimately as his own fingerprint. He slid a manila folder across the table. "They're trying to reclassify the strip as a legacy connector," he said, adjusting his glasses. "They cited a clause used for old equestrian trails. It's obscure, but not impossible to push through if no one contests it." I flipped through the paperwork. "But it's not a legacy route. It's a dead-end maintenance road." Ray tapped a highlighted line. "Doesn't matter. If they can convince the zoning board that it ever connected 2 community use points, they'll argue it has historical significance. That opens the door for a recreational easement. And once that's in place, they can push for a permanent right-of-way." I stared at him. "So if I don't fight it, they could take part of my property and turn it into a walking path. Or worse," he said, "a utility corridor. They mentioned installing irrigation lines beneath it. That would anchor it in public use." That same afternoon, I filed a formal opposition with the county's zoning office. Ray helped me draft it, citing every discrepancy in the HOA's application, starting with the false claim that the road had ever connected to anything other than a drainage ditch. We included satellite imagery, surveyor records, and a sworn statement from the prior owner verifying there'd never been any public access. That should have been enough. But 3 days later, a nondescript white van with no company markings parked outside my house. It stayed there for hours. No one got out. No tools, no clipboard, just a silhouette behind tinted glass watching. I walked out once, stood on the edge of my lawn, arms crossed. The van didn't move. I called the sheriff's department and reported a suspicious vehicle. When a deputy finally showed up and approached the van, the driver rolled down the window and handed her a sheet of paper. I couldn't hear what was said, but when she walked back to me, she looked uncomfortable. "They claim to be from the HOA's legal liaison team," she said. "Said they're here to assess easement boundaries." "They're not surveyors," I said. "They're sitting in a van with the engine running for 5 hours. She nodded slowly. "I'll let them know they need proper credentials to be on a residential street that long, but this is a civil matter, Mr. Zeller. I can't enforce anything unless they are trespassing." That night, someone dumped a pile of mulch across my driveway apron just behind the gate, not enough to block it, just enough to make a mess. I checked the footage. Same white van. A different driver. Hoodie up, face turned away from the camera. Ray called the next morning. "I just got word. The HOA filed an addendum to their zoning request. They're claiming your gate violates community ingress standards." I nearly dropped the phone. "That's a residential gate on private property with county approval?" "They're grasping," he said. "But it's forcing a review. You'll have to attend a hearing." "Fine," I said. "I'll bring the whole neighborhood with me." I spent the next 2 days going door to door. Not everyone was friendly. A few refused to answer, but some listened. Especially the ones who had their own stories, quiet complaints about Karrenna's fines, her surveillance, her threats. One woman, a nurse named Felicia, showed me a letter the HOA sent after she left a pair of scrubs hanging on her patio railing to dry. "Biological hazard," it said. Another man, a retired bus mechanic named Reggie, said she'd threatened to tow his pickup because it looked too commercial. I invited them all to the zoning hearing. The night before the hearing, I got a call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was short. A woman's voice, distorted, said, "You should drop this, Zeller. You're outnumbered." I forwarded the audio to Ray. The zoning hearing was held in a cramped municipal annex building with flickering lights and an ancient projector. I arrived early with a stack of printed exhibits and a thumb drive loaded with video evidence. Ray was already there, reviewing notes. We were seated at one folding table. The HOA board had a row of chairs on the opposite side. Karrenna sat in the center, flanked by 2 new faces, both in suits, neither looking particularly neighborly. When the hearing began, the zoning officer, a tall man with a tired expression and a nameplate that read G. Norwood, asked for opening statements. Karrenna stood. Our community has long relied on the rear path behind Mr. Zeller's property as a vital connector between residential and recreational areas. Its sudden closure has disrupted traffic patterns, endangered children, and compromised emergency access. Norwood raised an eyebrow. Emergency access. Is this road listed on any first responder access maps? Karrenna hesitated. Not currently, but it serves as an informal route used for decades. Ray stood next. We've submitted documentation proving the road was never designated for public use. We've included aerial photos, county plat maps, and a signed affidavit from the prior landowner. Norwood flipped through the packet. I see that. Ray gestured to the projector screen. We also have security footage showing ongoing harassment from individuals connected to the HOA, including trespassing and property damage. I cued the first clip. The white van, the mulch drop, a man in a hoodie sprinting back to the driver's side. Norwood frowned. Is this recent? 3 days ago, I said. I also received an anonymous voicemail warning me to drop opposition. One of the HOA's lawyers leaned in to whisper something to Karrenna. She didn't look pleased, then Ray dropped the hammer. We've also discovered, he said, holding up a new document, that the HOA submitted a forged letter of community support with 32 signatures. We contacted 10 of those individuals. None of them had signed anything. Norwood's head snapped up. Are you alleging document fraud? Ray nodded. We've provided affidavits from those homeowners. Norwood turned to the HOA's table. Do you have a response? One of the suited men stood. We'll need time to verify the authenticity of the complaints. You submitted them, Norwood said flatly. You're expected to verify them before filing. What followed was 20 minutes of backpedaling, deflection, and paper shuffling. Karrenna didn't say another word. When the hearing ended, Norwood announced the board would issue a decision within 10 business days. But that wasn't the end of it. 2 days later, the sheriff's office visited the HOA clubhouse with a warrant. Turns out Ray had passed the forged signatures along to the county prosecutor's office. Falsifying legal documents in a zoning case, that's a felony. They seized HOA records, computers, financial logs. Even the surveillance equipment Karrenna installed without notifying residents. Later that week, I got a knock on the door. It was Reggie holding a clipboard. We're starting a recall vote, he said. We need 30% of the neighborhood to sign off. By the end of the weekend, they had 45%. Karrenna resigned before the vote could even be tallied. The zoning board's decision arrived by mail 5 days later. Application denied. My gate was legal. My road was private. And the HOA was barred from submitting further zoning requests on my property for the next 5 years. It was over. But I didn't take the gate down. I added a second camera, installed motion lights, and donated the footage of the van to the sheriff's department, who were still investigating the HOA's liaison team, which it turned out didn't exist on any official registry. The best part. The new HOA president, a soft-spoken woman named Linda, showed up at my door 2 weeks later with a peace offering, a bottle of wine and a handwritten note. Some of us are sorry it got this far, she said. I accepted the wine, but not the apology, because I hadn't just won, I'd drawn a line. And made sure they knew exactly where it was. The first board meeting under Linda's leadership was held on a humid Tuesday evening, the kind where the sky hangs low and heavy, threatening rain but never delivering. The folding chairs in the clubhouse were packed, the air thick with a mix of curiosity and cautious optimism. I stood in the back, arms crossed, watching as Linda adjusted the microphone and cleared her throat. We're going to start by reviewing the audit results, she said, unfolding a printed report. There are some irregularities that need to be addressed. She didn't look at anyone in particular, but a few former board members in the front row shifted in their seats. One of them, a woman named Sharon who'd always worn oversized sunglasses indoors, reached for her water bottle with a shaky hand. Linda continued, over $30,000 in expenditures were unaccounted for over the last fiscal year. Several invoices were paid without board approval or proper documentation. The county's financial investigator is reviewing the records we submitted last week. There was a murmur across the room. Someone in the middle row muttered something under his breath, and a man in a pressed golf polo leaned forward with a grim frown. It got worse from there. Linda read from a page clipped to the back of the report. 2 payments were made to a company listed as Sunridge Community Solutions for consulting services. There is no such registered business. The checks were deposited into a personal bank account belonging to a former board officer. She didn't say the name. She didn't have to. The silence was punctuated only by the soft hum of the overhead ceiling fan, spinning uselessly in the heavy air. Linda set the papers down. We've forwarded everything to the county's white-collar crimes division. There will be interviews conducted. If you're contacted, I encourage full cooperation. After the meeting, I stepped outside to get some air. It was finally starting to cool off, the storm clouds breaking into scattered streaks of pink and indigo. I didn't expect anyone to follow, but Reggie appeared beside me, holding a can of ginger ale. Reckon they'll try to pin it on someone lower down, he said, watching the cars roll past the front gate. That's how it usually goes with folks like that. Not this time, I said. Too many eyes on it now, he nodded. Funny how quiet it got once you put that gate up, like someone pulled the batteries out of the neighborhood. I looked toward the road, where the last of the evening light glinted off the iron bars. Quiet's not the problem. It's what people do when they think no one's watching. The next morning, 2 unmarked cruisers parked near the HOA office. 2 detectives in plainclothes walked in and stayed for over an hour. By lunch, word had already spread through the neighborhood. Sharon's husband was seen packing their SUV. By sunset, they were gone. Over the following week, subpoenas landed in at least 4 mailboxes. One went to Louis, who'd always trailed behind Karrenna like a loyal dog. Another went to the treasurer, a man no one had seen in days. The investigation moved quickly apparently. The forged signatures were only the beginning. The county prosecutor held a press conference in front of the municipal building the next Thursday. We have reason to believe that certain individuals on the former HOA board engaged in a pattern of fraudulent activity, including the misappropriation of funds, falsification of legal documents, and deliberate misuse of their administrative authority for personal gain. A reporter asked if any arrests had been made. The prosecutor didn't hesitate. Warrants were served this morning. That afternoon, Karrenna was taken into custody outside a salon 2 towns over. She was still wearing her leopard print visor when they walked her out in cuffs. Someone filmed it from their car window and posted it on the neighborhood message board. The video didn't have sound, but you could see her mouth open wide as she shouted something unintelligible at the officers. Her mugshot surfaced later that night. No visor, no makeup, just a pale face and a vacant stare. It was quiet for a few weeks after that. The board held an emergency vote to fill the remaining seats. Linda stayed on as president, and Reggie accepted the role of community mediator. The new treasurer was a retired bookkeeper named Miriam, who kept a 3-ring binder with every receipt and transaction logged in pen. I didn't attend the meetings anymore. I didn't need to. The neighborhood had found its balance again, maybe not perfect, but honest. One evening, well after the sun had dipped below the rooftops, I heard a knock on my door. It was Felicia, the nurse who dealt with the patio nonsense. She was holding a tray of lemon bars and wearing scrubs with cartoon frogs on them. I just got off the evening shift, she said, brushing hair from her eyes. Figured you deserved something sweet. I stepped aside to let her in. Long day, not as long as the ones you had, she said, setting the tray on the counter. I heard what you did for the zoning board. You didn't just protect your road, you gave the rest of us a chance to breathe. We stood there for a moment, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. "I didn't plan on it," I said. But once they pushed, I had to push back. She smiled, not the kind you give out of politeness, but the real kind, the kind that meant something. "Well, thanks for pushing." The next morning, I walked the length of the gate, checking the hinges and keypad. Everything was still in place. The fresh coat of paint had dried smooth, and the new motion light sensor clicked on right as I passed. I paused at the end of the driveway and looked back toward the house. It was quiet again, not the tense, eggshell silence of before, but something calmer. Settled. Later that week, I received a letter from the zoning board. It wasn't a warning or a complaint. It was a request for a copy of the documentation I'd gathered to use as part of a training seminar for other municipalities dealing with abuse from private associations. I agreed. On one condition: they had to include a section on homeowner rights and retaliation protections. A month passed. Then another. The legal proceedings against the former board members picked up steam. Karrenna was charged with document fraud, misuse of association funds, and obstruction of a municipal process. 2 others faced charges related to financial misappropriation. The plea deals started coming in after that. No one wanted to go to trial, especially after the evidence surfaced of how they'd coordinated the forged letters and paid themselves under fake vendor names. The county assigned a temporary oversight committee to ensure no HOA board could act unilaterally again. All future decisions required full meeting minutes and transparency postings on a public access bulletin. I repurposed the folder I'd kept with all the documentation. Added a final tab labeled Resolved. Slid the last printed article inside a copy of the local paper, headline reading, "HOA scandal ends in felony charges, reforms underway." Reggie stopped by a few days later with a toolbox and a question. "You mind if I install a second community notice board near the front gate?" he asked. "One that actually tells the truth," I nodded. "Just keep it out of the easement." He laughed, the kind of deep belly laugh that hadn't been heard around here in a long time. "I'll make sure it's 2 feet clear." Summer faded into fall. The leaves turned amber and gold, and the neighborhood felt finally like one, not because we all agreed on everything, but because we'd been through the storm and figured out who was worth trusting. One evening, I stood at the edge of the gate and watched as a pair of kids biked past on the sidewalk, their tires thumping softly over the cracks. They waved. I waved back behind me. The gate stood firm, unmoving, a reminder that lines do matter, that boundaries are worth defending. And that sometimes, all it takes to stop a bully in their tracks is one person willing to say no, and mean it.